Welcome to the Pandemic Pinup Happy Hour. It is Sunday and it is the end of the month. And we have been doing a lot of different cocktails through the month of August. But if you were here for the very beginning, we started off the month with something called Aperitifs, a cocktail that's really good to whet your appetite, help you get excited about a meal, or even actually induce hunger. So to wrap up at the end of the month, I thought it would only be fair to do the polar opposite, which are also known as digestives, also known as digestivos if you speak Italian. But basically, they are cocktails that are great to end a meal. They're cocktails that are good in lieu of dessert. And quite honestly, I find a lot of them to be really good for like afternoon or evening meetings. They just feel very wrapped up, if that even makes sense. It's kind of hard to explain my thoughts sometimes, so I'm sorry if my words are a little weird. But I'm really excited about these cocktails. So one of the differences between aperitifs and digestives, when we discussed aperitifs at the beginning of the month, they tend to be a little bit lighter, whether that's on sugar content, alcohol content, or even flavor, because they're not designed to really bog down your stomach or make you feel full. Whereas digestives usually tend to be a little bit bolder. They can be a little bit on the sweet side, especially if they are designed to replace a dessert, but they can also just be composed of ingredients that aid in digestion. So it started off with having like aperitif and digestive style liqueurs, which were herbal based. And if you look into the science behind a lot of ingredients and food and preparations, a lot of things are to aid in digestion or induce hunger. So if you know how to use those ingredients correctly, you can actually create cocktails that do that. So I've created 3, and I'm really excited. And as always, there will be puns or idioms because that's kind of my thing. Let's just go ahead and jump in. Let's see, which one do I want to do first? I think we'll do Epilogue first. So I'm not a huge fan of martinis. I'm very, very picky about them. I've had very few that I like. But it is an incredibly popular, incredibly well-known cocktail. And I figured I could do something like a riff. A martini is a fantastic digestive cocktail or a post-dinner cocktail because it usually has a really clean flavor profile while still being complex, and it aids in digestion. So this particular riff is going to be called Epilogue, and it's going to be a gin-based martini. So we're just going to start off really simple with 1.5 ounces of gin. And we're going to pour it into a mixing glass. So this isn't going to be shaken. You'll also see that as kind of a trend when it comes to aperitifs and digestives. A lot of aperitifs are shaken or in the style of a highball, whereas digestives tend to be creamy or stirred. Not that that is absolutely what they must be, but it does happen quite often. So once we have the 1.5 ounces of gin in there, I've infused a dry white vermouth with rhubarb. This went out on the prep sheet earlier this week. If you didn't catch it or need the info, I am more than happy to send that to you. So we're going to use 1.25 ounces of that. And I am going to add 1/4 ounce of yellow chartreuse. So you might have heard of chartreuse. Green chartreuse is much more well-known. Yellow chartreuse is my personal favorite. Don't tell other bartenders that. But green chartreuse is really tasty. It's definitely more herbal, a little bit more prominent on the bitter notes. But the difference between yellow and green, the yellow tends to have a little bit more nuanced sweetness. It has the addition of honey and saffron, which gives it a pretty bright color. So I'm going to be using 1/4 ounce of that. Perfect. Just like a martini, we're going to shake. No, I'm kidding. We're going to stir. The whole shake and not stirred thing. I get asked this quite a bit as to whether I shake or stir my martinis. And quite honestly, you can do it however you like. But the saying or the lore goes that the reason Bond had his martini shaken instead of stirred is that if there is anything else in the martini other than the classic ingredients of vermouth, vodka, or gin, that it ends up foaming up, particularly if there's poison. So I guess if you're in fear for your life, have your martinis shaken. But if you're not, take the time and stir them. So you want to stir it for about 20, maybe 30 seconds. It just kind of depends on what you think. Martinis vary across the board in ratios from 50-50 to a 5-to-1 to a 4-to-1 to a whole amount and then just a splash or a rinse of the glass. So this one I like to stir for about 20, maybe 25 seconds. And then once it's really nice and cold, I'm gonna strain it. Really, really simple. So I will say this though, this is a martini that I'm serving over ice. I know, shoot me, it's fine. That's just because martinis tend to warm up with time, and I think they lose a little bit of their charm once they start to warm up. So I'm going to include a little ice cube. I'm going to pour this directly over top. And then I'm going to go ahead and garnish with a really pretty rhubarb. And rhubarb is kind of like a tart celery. Like if you could take cranberries and celery and mix them together, that's kind of the flavor profile. It has that crisp, fresh water taste that celery has, as people like to call it crunchy water, but it has that really tart brightness that you find in like hibiscus or fresh cranberries. So I'm gonna put that in there, and simple, easy peasy, that is the epilogue. Very nice. Now, martinis are incredibly boozy, so that looks really harmless, but it's all alcohol, guys. There's nothing else in there. So sip cautiously. Moving on, I wanted to make one with coffee. I really enjoy coffee, obviously. It's been something I bring up a lot on this program, but I really enjoy the culture of coffee in other countries where they do coffee with meals on the regular basis, instead of just like, oh, I'm in the mood for a coffee. It's almost like it is a staple at the table in many places, whether that's in Italy or France, even some places in the Middle East. There's also a ton of different ways they drink it, usually hot, usually with the addition of alcohol if it's at the end of the meal. But I really enjoy coffee cocktails. I wanted to make a digestif that gave me all of the coffee that I would want at the end of a meal, but all of the flavor and booze of a digestif. So this is a really hefty cocktail. This one is going to be shaken. So word of fair warning, there's a lot of liquid. So if you aren't really comfortable with your shaking, this is going to be a lot more liquid than you've shaken before. So if you're kind of worried about it, just put it in a mason jar and then screw the top on. So with that being said, we're going to start with our coffee. And it's going to be 4 ounces. I told you guys it's a lot. Now, if you wanted to, you could dial this back to about 3 ounces would probably be my lowest recommendation, just because this is meant to be an iced coffee digestif. It's definitely not the size of a normal digestif. Digestifs tend to be like 3-4 ounce cocktails. This is already going to be way over that. But I promise it's super tasty. I'm going to use an overproof rum. This one is a dark rum, and then overproof means that it's usually over about 50%. It kind of varies depending on who you talk to, but most rums are going to be at 40, maybe 45%. So anything over that is really considered overproof rum. This one comes in at 69%. Haha, if you're immature and laugh at that number. But a lot of overproof rums are white or clear. This one is aged and it's artisanal. It's called Old Fashioned Traditional Dark, so OFTD, and it's made by Plantation Rum. So we're going to use 1.5 ounces of that. Now just remember, being overproof, that means that this 1.5 ounces of rum has more alcohol content than the standard rum you might be using in your bar. All right, now we're going to add a couple modifiers. I'm going to add cynar, which is an Italian Amaro that the primary ingredient is artichoke. And I know that sounds insane, but what it is, it's just really herbaceous, really vegetal, and mildly bitter. And I say mildly because I really like bitter, but if you drink this on its own, it is incredibly bitter for people who do not accustom themselves to drinking or eating bitter things. So I'm going to add 1/4 ounce of cynar. And then I'm going to add a little bit of some sweet to this cocktail. So it's going to start with a second modifier, which is going to be Creme De Cacao, a chocolate liqueur. And I'm going to do 1/4 ounce of that as well. And guys, I know this is a laundry list of ingredients. I do really enjoy keeping my cocktails simple and easy to replicate, where you don't need all these bottles. But considering I have all these bottles, sometimes I like to kind of explore and just add a ton of stuff together and see what works. So I'm going to add a ½ ounce of sorghum. So sorghum is a syrup obtained from the sorghum grain. It's got the texture of like molasses or honey, which is kind of why I'm using this spoon. I could absolutely just pour this out like I would a honey, but this jar is really full and I don't want to cover my entire bar in sorghum while on camera. It's something I'd rather not do. So now that I've got that in there, I'm gonna scrape that all into the cocktail. All right. Beautiful. So obviously this is a very sticky cocktail. I highly recommend keeping your workspace clean if at all possible. All right, so sorghum away, putting that over there. And then I'm going to add some clove bitters. Now, these are homemade clove bitters made by a former colleague of mine, and they are phenomenal. But if you needed to make some just kind of on the fly and wanted to make your own, I would take an Angostura bitter and then add a ton of cloves, let it sit for a day or two, and then just that way it's like similar in complexity, but it has more of a clove base. So with that being said, I'm going to add 4 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it nice and balanced. Bitters are the salt of the cocktail world. And now that that's all in there, I am going to go ahead and get my ice. So again, lots of liquid here. Lots of liquid. All right, so before I shake, I do want to get my glass ready. So I have a highball glass because, as I said, high volume content. And I have some nice inch cubes I'm going to put in here. My best friend to be on camera. That. Then we're going to shake this, and hopefully I don't get this all over my really nice white cardigan. All right. I like to shake this one for about 15, maybe 10 seconds. Usually about 15. And the fun thing about coffee cocktails is when you shake them and they have a sweetener added, they get really foamy. So I'm going to pour this over my ice. It's going to look like a majestic iced coffee. Look at that, guys. And then as a garnish, so as I said, I was using Chinar, and then I just really enjoy the flavor profile it brings, but there's some complexity in this drink. Chinar does not tell everybody its ingredients, but I get some hints of like citrus peel, and definitely I use those clove bitters. So for my garnish, I have this lemon peel that's studded with clove. Then I'm going to just put that right there. And that, guys, is something I'm calling in conclusion. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Oh gosh, it's so good. Oh, it's so good. So strong, but so good. If you like strong coffee, if you like alcohol-forward cocktails, if you like dark, roasted, bitter, chocolatey notes, this is the DJ Steve for you. All right, moving along. We got one more. Trying to get through this pretty quick so I don't take up y'all's Sunday. But the last cocktail of the day is called Seal the Deal. And I wanted to try and create a Scotch cocktail. Scotch is not something I play with a lot, mainly because Scotch cocktails are frowned upon by most Scotch drinkers. And I don't like Scotch neat usually. I'm not a huge fan of peaty Scotches. I think there is a really large category to explore and taste, and I'm still learning. So I have high hopes that I will get a more accustomed palate to Scotch, and that I will also find a renewed gusto for the spirit, if you will. But I really do enjoy playing around with it in cocktails. One of my absolute favorite Scotch cocktails, which is hard to not like, absolute classic, called the Penicillin. If you haven't had it, please make it. It's got ginger, honey, lemon, Scotch. It's fantastic. Now, I wanted to make it digestive with Scotch, but I wanted to be able to like it. So what we're going to be doing for this particular cocktail, it's also going to be stirred. And then I'm going to be using 1.5 ounces of Scotch. And this one is a name I cannot say because I don't speak Scottish, but it's very poorly pronounced. Brewich Ladich, Islay barley, or Islay barley. I can't remember exactly how that's pronounced. But it is specifically basically an unpeated scotch. So I'm going to use 1.5 ounces of that. I'm going to pour it directly into my mixing glass. And then I'm going to add a 3/4 ounce of shochu. And shochu tends to be made with barley, but it can be made out of a whole bunch of other spirits, or sorry, grains. So this one is a barley-based shochu, putting 3/4 ounce of that in there. And then I brewed some oolong tea. So I'm going to do also, little part came out. Nice. So 3/4 ounce of the oolong tea as well. And then to tie it all together, we're going to use 2 ingredients. One's going to be a 1/4 ounce of simple. I really tried to use as little simple as possible so that all of the flavors would tie together and feel balanced without making this a sweet cocktail. And then we're going to use 1 intentional dash of grapefruit bitters. Okay. Now, with all that in there, we're going to ice this bad boy. Stir this. About 20 to 30 seconds as well. This one's going to be served up just like the martini. If you're unfamiliar with that particular phrasing, up means without ice. So I'm going to be serving this up. I'm going to be serving it into a really pretty little coupe that I have, or a Nick and Nora glass, which is kind of like a smaller coupe. And the garnish for this could be anything. You could do a grapefruit slice because of the bitters. You could do a grapefruit peel, a dehydrated grapefruit. You could also do a whole slew of other things, but what I chose to do was to put tea on the outside of the glass as more of a decorative garnish. If any of it gets eaten, it's still edible, but that way nothing's sitting in the cocktail, modifying the flavor profile that it has, because I found that this was really, really well balanced. So as you can see, I have that nice little tea line. It's just tea leaves. Let me get that up there closer. I have the tea leaves that I put on there. I attached them, if you will, with a simple syrup. I'll pour this in there. And that, guys, is called sealing the deal. All right, let's give that a little taste. Oh, so good. I want to explain this. Let's see. So you get sweet notes, but in the way that bread is sweet, right? There's certain grains that are just sweet in nature. And that's just because grains can produce a lot of sugar. So you're really getting the sweetness from the barley, but then you're getting some minerality and a lot of earthiness from the scotch. The tea brings in some really nice tones of like bitterness and a light astringency, and that grapefruit just kind of brings it all together with just a hint, if that, of citrus. Like citrus is over in the corner and it kind of looked at my cocktail funny, and now it's got that little hint going on. But yeah, that's called Seal the Deal, and that wraps up our digestives. And I know that was fast and dirty. Sometimes I do classes like that. Sometimes I have a ton of stuff to talk about. But today, that's all I have for you guys. And I'm working on the programming for September, so please stay tuned. I publish the calendar on the Pandemic Pinup Instagram account. That's also where all the recipes go up. I publish videos throughout the week that are all different kinds of things, from techniques to absolutely different recipes than the ones I do here, or just kind of what's on my mind or what goes on behind the scenes. And that's on the TikTok account for @Pandemic Pinup. The classes are available for rewatch, whether it's on the Underground Cooking Club Facebook page or on the YouTube channel for the Chef with Red Shoes. And I know that is incredibly disorienting amounts of information, and I'm just not going to get it together. I'm going to keep telling you guys that I'm not going to get it together, and you guys can just find me wherever you find me. I like it. It makes it more interesting and more organic for me. I'm sorry if it makes it more complicated for y'all. I do accept virtual tips. All of my information is in the captions of these videos or on my accounts if you'd like to send some money my way to just help me with some more experimentation. And as we move into the holidays, if you guys have needs or wants, things you want me to work with, recipes you'd like designed for you because maybe you're throwing a party or you want to make a drink for someone special to celebrate something, reach out, let me know. I love working with prompts. So I'm here for all of the feedback and all of the requests. Just send them my way. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I will see you soon. Bye.